Jamie Dornan didn't say anything unusual in those clips. That was the problem. Fans noticed that the most telling moments happened when he wasn't speaking at all, when his face shifted for less than a second before returning to neutral. These weren't dramatic reactions or obvious tells, but fleeting changes that felt accidental, almost intrusive, like something the camera wasn't meant to catch. The first videos didn't come from tabloids or gossip accounts. They came from fans casually rewatching old interviews, slowing them down, replaying moments they had once ignored. A slight tightening of the jaw, a pause that lingered too long, an eye movement that didn't match the tone of the conversation. One clip led to another, and soon the pattern became impossible to unsee. What unsettled viewers most was how consistent those moments were. Different years, different settings, different interviewers, yet the same micro-reactions appeared whenever Dakota Johnson spoke or moved into his peripheral vision. These expressions didn't show up during rehearsed answers or promotional soundbites. They surfaced in the spaces between, when attention drifted and control loosened. Micro-expressions are notoriously difficult to fake. They occur before the conscious mind has time to intervene, revealing emotional responses that contradict spoken language. Actors, especially experienced ones, are trained to control their faces under scrutiny. That made the situation more curious, because Jamie Dornan was known for being particularly guarded in public settings. Fans began comparing his behavior across interviews with other co-stars. In similar environments, his expressions remained steady, predictable, professional. He listened, responded, smiled when appropriate, and disengaged cleanly. Only around Dakota did those brief lapses appear, as if something interrupted the rhythm he had perfected. One early clip drew particular attention. Dakota was answering a question about the intensity of filming, speaking calmly and without emphasis. Jamie, standing beside her, glanced over for a split second, his lips parting slightly before he pressed them together again. The moment passed so quickly it seemed meaningless until fans noticed variations of the same reaction repeating elsewhere. Another video showed him nodding along to an interviewer's comment, only to freeze momentarily when Dakota laughed off camera. His expression shifted, softened, then hardened again as if corrected. These weren't moments of attraction or affection in any obvious sense. They were moments of recognition, responses that felt instinctive rather than performed. As more clips surfaced, the narrative shifted. This wasn't about romantic speculation or hidden feelings in the conventional sense. It became about awareness. Jamie appeared more alert, more reactive, more exposed when Dakota was present, even when the conversation had nothing to do with her. Body language analysts weighed in cautiously, emphasizing that micro-expressions don't reveal intention, only reaction. They suggested the expressions could indicate heightened attention, unresolved tension, or emotional familiarity. None of those explanations confirmed anything concrete, but they reinforced one idea: the reactions were real. What made fans uneasy was the timing of these expressions. They often appeared when Jamie believed the focus was elsewhere, when the interviewer addressed Dakota directly, or when laughter filled the room. These weren't moments staged for the audience. They felt private, like fragments of an internal dialogue briefly leaking outward. The deeper fans looked, the more the timeline mattered. The micro-expressions appeared early, persisted through peak promotional cycles, and continued years later in unrelated appearances. This wasn't a phase that faded with distance or familiarity. If anything, the reactions became more subtle, as if increasingly suppressed rather than resolved. Some viewers tried to dismiss the pattern as coincidence or overanalysis. Others argued that shared intense projects naturally create lasting nonverbal habits. Yet even skeptics admitted something felt different here. The expressions didn't suggest nostalgia or professional rapport. They suggested something unresolved. What fans couldn't ignore was the asymmetry. Dakota Johnson appeared relaxed, open, and unguarded in most interactions. Jamie, by contrast, seemed hyper-aware in her presence, monitoring himself more closely. The micro-expressions looked like moments where that monitoring failed. This imbalance raised uncomfortable questions. Why would an actor known for composure lose it in such small but consistent ways? Why did these reactions persist long after the films ended and public narratives settled? And why did they only appear when Dakota was near, even when no one was watching closely? By the time compilations spread across social media, the clips had taken on a life of their own. Fans weren't searching for scandal anymore. They were searching for meaning. Each replay felt like peeling back a layer, not to reveal a secret, but to confirm that something had never fully gone away. What made people keep watching wasn't what Jamie Dornan said in those moments. It was what he couldn't stop his face from saying before he had the chance to stop it. As the clips spread, the discussion quietly changed direction. Fans were no longer asking whether Jamie Dornan and Dakota Johnson shared chemistry, because that felt too simple. The real question became why these reactions refused to disappear, even when years had passed and careers had moved on. Something about the timing and repetition made the pattern harder to explain away. What stood out most was how different these moments looked compared to Jamie's interactions with other co-stars. In interviews with actresses he had known for years, his expressions stayed composed and predictable. He listened politely, smiled on cue, and disengaged without hesitation. The rhythm never broke, and the micro-movements stayed hidden. Around Dakota, however, that rhythm slipped just enough to be noticeable. His reactions came slightly too early or slightly too late, as if his attention was pulled before his mind caught up. It wasn't nervousness or excitement in a conventional sense. It looked more like familiarity colliding with restraint. Experts in nonverbal behavior cautioned against drawing dramatic conclusions. Micro-expressions don't reveal secret intentions or unspoken confessions. They simply show where attention and emotion briefly intersect before control takes over. Still, even cautious analysis acknowledged that repetition across unrelated contexts suggests something meaningful rather than random. What made this particularly striking was Jamie Dornan's reputation for discipline. He was known for maintaining emotional distance in public, even when pressed by intrusive questions. That level of control usually improves with time, not weakens. Yet these reactions continued to surface long after promotional obligations ended. Fans noticed that the micro-expressions often appeared when Dakota was not addressing him directly. She would be answering a question, laughing with an interviewer, or reacting to something off-camera. Jamie's face would shift in response, even though there was no social expectation for him to react at all. This suggested that the trigger wasn't performance or public attention. It was presence. Dakota didn't need to look at him or involve him for the reaction to occur. The awareness seemed automatic, like a reflex that hadn't been unlearned. As speculation grew, mainstream media largely avoided the topic. Articles focused on career updates, past roles, and safe anecdotes. Body language analysis, especially when it hints at unresolved dynamics, occupies an uncomfortable space. It invites interpretation without offering proof, and few outlets want to step into that uncertainty. Jamie and Dakota never addressed the clips directly. They didn't confirm, deny, or mock the observations. Their silence allowed the conversation to exist without closure. In the absence of explanation, viewers were left with the footage itself, looping and replaying in search of consistency. Some fans suggested that the expressions reflected the intensity of shared work that left a lasting imprint. Others believed they pointed to an emotional bond that never needed a label. What united these interpretations was the sense that something unfinished lingered beneath the surface. The most compelling aspect was not the possibility of hidden feelings, but the failure of erasure. Time usually dulls reactions, especially when distance and new experiences intervene. In this case, time seemed to refine the restraint without fully eliminating the response. The micro-expressions became quieter, not rarer. This raised a subtle but powerful idea. Perhaps the reactions weren't about longing or regret at all. Perhaps they were about recognition, the kind that forms when two people understand each other in a specific context that never fully dissolves. That kind of connection doesn't demand action, but it doesn't vanish either. By revisiting old clips, fans weren't uncovering a secret narrative. They were witnessing the residue of something real enough to leave traces, yet contained enough to remain private. The fascination came from watching control succeed almost entirely, except for those brief moments when the face moved faster than intention. In the end, the micro-expressions didn't answer any questions definitively. They simply refused to let the story settle. And for viewers, that refusal was more compelling than any statement could have been.